Good evening and welcome to the November 2nd, 2023 Park and Recreation regular video meeting. I am Peter Struck, Park and Rec Commission Chair. Tonight's Park and Rec Commission meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being recorded and will broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this evening. City staff and guests are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or via the internet. Additionally, the city has opened up the community center to provide public space for viewing and participating in the meeting. Welcome to all, and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please turn on your microphones, and will the city staff please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner McCarthy.
Here.
Chair Struck.
Here.
Commissioner Cohen.
Here.
Vice Chair Burstein.
Here.
Commissioner Markson. Commissioner Westberg.
Here.
Commissioner Hay.
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. City staff, is there anyone who has signed up for appearances that wishes to address the commission tonight?
No, there is not, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first item on the agenda is the department report and update, and I'd like to welcome Recreation Manager Ryan Daly.
Good evening, Parks Commission. Let me see here if I can share my screen. Please let me know when you see it. Should be very Halloween-ish. Hold on.
There.
All right. Off and rolling. There's going to be a theme to this. This week, or last weekend, I should say, we had a great weekend. We kicked it off with the annual trick-or-treating in Town Center on Friday night, and the weather, as we were talking, was just outstanding. It was a little chilly that night, but it was a great event. We had huge numbers of families turn out to trick-or-treat in Town Center. A majority of the businesses, more so than previous years, took part, many of which actually ended up running out of candy. We had so many kids down there. It turned out to be just an outstanding event, and just a huge thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for developing the map and soliciting the businesses to participate, and to our city staff that went out and also put up booths and handed out candy as well. It was a very popular event again this year. All right, and then we wrapped up Halloween weekend on Sunday, where we had sponsors and food trucks and professional pumpkin carver, the Bridge radio station, all were on hand as families navigated the Mercerdale Loop to view the various pumpkins. This event does rely heavily on the community to bring their pumpkins and drop them off there at Mercer Delta Park so that people can walk around and take a look at them. We did have over 200 that were on site that day, and we're estimating about 500 people took part in the event coming through. I do want to give a big shout out to our Mercer Island staff, which carved 50 pumpkins leading up to the event to put out there. And I will give a plug to our city manager, who I know carved 11 pumpkins going into that weekend. So I'm guessing Jessie's hands are a little bit sore this week with all that carving that she did. But it was an outstanding event. The weather was great. Tons of people. I think it's one of those really unique events that Mercer Island has to offer, and that's truly community based. So it was a ton of fun, and thank you to everybody who participated and all of our sponsors. And then we carried into the week of Halloween, and I want to give Raven a shout out for this one. Raven coordinated the community coffee hour Halloween celebration with the kids from Creative Learning Center, which is the daycare down below here at the community center. They came in. You can't see them, but we do have some senior citizens in the background as well that heard some songs from the kids. It was a great event. Lots of people, as you can see, and Leap even made it out for that event. Another event, this was a couple weekends ago, the Arbor Day event. On the 21st, our natural resources team hosted the planting and commemorative tree planting for the South Shoreline here at Luther Burbank Park. The restoration area is about 900 feet, which encompassed some eroding shoreline. Mayor Neese was on hand, provided some welcoming remarks, which was just prior to the volunteers planting 425 native plants in that 900-foot stretch. And so thank you to all of the volunteers. I know we had a couple of commissioners as well as council members who came out and assisted in this event and allowed me to keep my hands nice and clean while they did all of the hard work. So thank you to everybody for their participation in that event as well. Island Lanterns is coming back. This community art project will be again at Mercerdale, and we may be expanding portions of it to the community center. We're going to be doing some community painting days in January, so we'll have more information coming out on that. The lanterns will be displayed from January through March, and some of that is weather dependent. A day like today, those lanterns don't hold up too well in the wind, so we keep an eye on that and bring them in or take them down as needed. But as I mentioned, we will have some displays potentially at the community center as well. And we use Port of Seattle funds, a grant to help support this project. All right, and we're talking about Illuminate MI already. So our first Illuminate MI event starts on December 1st with the tree lighting and firehouse munch. That's followed by December 2nd with the holiday market, which will take place at the community center. December 7th will be the menorah lighting at Mercerdale Park, and then the Girl Scout toy drive on the 9th, and the Argosy ships here at Luther Burbank Park on December 17th. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be sunny, possibly a bit chilly on each of those days, but I'm anticipating great weather. All right, bike skills area. I know many of the commissioners had an opportunity to get out and check out that facility. We are going through just a final punch list, which includes installing a split rail fence, removing some construction fencing, some tree work that needs to be done, adding the signage to the area, and then some revegetation work that includes some plantings both inside that BSA area and outside, and then working on that slope and ravine area also. The ribbon cutting will take place on Wednesday, November 15th from 3 o'clock to 4:30 at that location at the bike skills area, and we will have some light refreshments and snacks provided. The commission, I will be sending out an email to make sure that this is on all of your calendars so that you're able to participate as well. And with that, I thank you, and we'll stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you, Ryan. The second item of regular business is to review and consider approving the minutes from the October 5th, 2023 meeting. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 5th, 2023 meeting?
I so move.
Moved by Commissioner Westberg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who is that?
Jody.
Oh, Jody, thank you. Commissioner McCarthy. So there's been a motion by Commissioner Westberg and a second by Commissioner McCarthy. Commissioners, does anyone have any questions or comments before we vote? Okay, so please turn on your microphones, and again, will city staff conduct a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Cohen,
Aye.
Vice Chair Burstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Hay,
Aye.
Commissioner Westberg,
Aye.
Chair Struck,
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy,
Aye.
Commissioner Markson. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. The third item of business tonight is the review of disqualifying criteria for the draft recreation sponsorship policy. And to begin this discussion, we welcome Recreation Manager Ryan Daly and Recreation Supervisor Katie Herzog.
Okay, Cassidy is just going to share the screen and we will get started.
Katie, can you see that?
Not yet.
All right, give me just a moment.
Okay. There we go. All right, hello, I'm Katie Herzog, Recreation Supervisor, and tonight we are going to review the disqualifying criteria for a draft sponsorship policy. We have just a quick presentation. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask throughout as we move through the slides. We are looking for just a discussion tonight, and then we will be returning with a full policy draft to bring to the Parks and Rec Commission at a later meeting. So tonight we will go over a little bit of a background, what is a sponsor, and then we will dive into the disqualifying criteria and have a discussion among the commissioners. So why are we here? The city lacks a sponsorship policy and any criteria in the process of gaining sponsorship agreements. We do currently accept and solicit sponsorships, just absent of any sort of formal policy. Annually, the Recreation Division receives approximately $40,000 to $70,000 in sponsorship revenue. That's from different organizations from recreation, real estate, hospitality, nonprofit industries, and the majority of those being Mercer Island organizations and businesses. So what is a sponsor? A sponsor we are defining as a person or organization that provides funds, goods, or services to the city in exchange for recognition or any other promotional considerations or benefits with respect to a specific city program, event, facility, or service. Currently, staff have defined sponsorship opportunities for some of our community special events. We solicit sponsorships with varying dollar amounts and set benefits to go along with the revenue collected. We almost always include logo and name recognition on marketing materials, on our website, our social media, and include on-site tabling opportunities for those sponsors. There were some questions on how sponsors and vendors differ. Vendors really just pay to have a space at an event. So for example, at Summer Celebration, we have nonprofit and community groups and also arts and crafts vendors who have the opportunity to pay for a booth space. Those vendors do not receive any kind of recognition on any sort of marketing materials or really any other benefits except for being on site at the event day of. On the screen is our last year's Summer Celebration sponsorship packet. It's the cover page and then the benefits page, just to give you an idea of what we do put out to local businesses. And now I'm going to pass it on to Cassidy to continue the conversation.
Thanks, Katie. Hello, commissioners. The following list of criteria was generated through a search of municipal sponsorship policy examples that were sourced nationwide by staff. I'm going to give a high-level overview briefly of the proposed criteria, and then I'll share the city's next steps and open up the discussion. First in our lineup of disqualifying sponsorship criteria are businesses that are subject to regulation or monitoring by law enforcement agencies for regulatory compliance. We then have religious or political organizations, commercial enterprises whose business is primarily derived from the sale or manufacture of alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana products, sponsorship agreements whose conditions are inconsistent with the city's mission, values, policies, and/or planning documents, profanity, obscenity, and hate speech. Then on our second slide, we have any sponsorship agreement that will or may promote those listed products or services that are contrary to public health, safety, or welfare. Other factors that might affect or undermine the public trust or public confidence in the city's impartiality or interfere with the efficient delivery of city services or operations. Finally, the list ends with this catch-all, any other reason as determined by the city manager in their sole discretion. So following the upcoming discussion, staff will review feedback from tonight's meeting and use it to develop a draft sponsorship policy for commission review at a future PRC meeting. And staff anticipate that City Council will review this full policy sometime in Q1 of 2024. With that, I will stop sharing my screen and open the meeting for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Cassidy. I think that probably the best way to proceed is some of the commissioners provided some comments and questions, and then it was circulated back by staff called the sponsorship policy matrix. I think that came back out yesterday, where there were some staff responses and so forth. So perhaps we could start by limiting our questions and comments and observations to this document. And then after we kind of complete this, if there are other questions that are not on this document, we can clearly address those. So with that introduction, commissioners, do you have any comments, discussions, observations on the matrix specifically? Ryan Daly.
I didn't see anybody's hands jump right up, so I did want to sort of elaborate on what Katie was saying. You know, as we look at this policy, what I'm really hoping to walk away with tonight is discussion from the Parks Commission on what they would like to see, or maybe what they don't want to see as sponsors for recreation events and programs. And so I'm kind of trying to sit back and take in any feedback, get reactions to the disqualifying criteria, and be able to further utilize that to develop the final policy draft recommendation.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioner Hay.
Thanks. I'll jump right in because it looks like my item is first on the matrix here. And this is an item which actually falls outside of the disqualifying criteria. I know that's the main topic that we're discussing tonight, but the first item on here is the definitions, because I think the definitions do become important as we are considering any other portion of this document. And the one definition that stood out to me as quite strange and didn't really make sense was the definition of person. And we saw that come up in the presentation that we just saw, where it describes a sponsor as a person. And we know that a sponsor can be an individual, an entity, an organization, many different things. So I found this definition to be unusual and also problematic because we don't use the word person in the policy. So there's no need to define it. I didn't understand why it was there. So that's just a side note before we get into the actual disqualifying criteria. Maybe the commission wants to discuss whether or not we think that definition is necessary or not.
Commissioner Westberg.
Thank you. I don't want to lose Ashley's thought because I agreed 100% with her comments. I was going to ask a broader question of Ryan perhaps before we wade into the details, and that is, and this actually I believe was also a question that Ashley raised in the matrix, is why are we only seeing this little piece of the policy? That just seems kind of odd to me, instead of looking at a whole package altogether and being able to weigh the the positive criteria and the negative criteria. It just seems weird to start with the negative criteria. So that's question number one. Question number two is, since the city has had sponsorships in the past quite successfully, what are the issues that you guys have had to address in terms of dealing with those partnership requests? Have you been faced with making difficult decisions about partnership requests from political, religious, or organizations promoting products and services that are not consistent with city values? What is the problem here that we're trying to address with this policy, other than just having a policy?
Well, that was a lot of questions all wrapped in one, Commissioner Westberg, but very good ones. So let's see. Let me try to organize my thought here. So I'll address Commissioner Hayes' concern or question that you kind of piggybacked on there. The term person, as we've defined it, is a catch-all. We don't want to go through and have to name out organization, individual, consistently. So we've labeled it person. I hear the commission's concern, or I hear two commissioners who may have concern with this. This is a fairly common practice when defining terms, that we have created that definition. I understand that an organization is not a person, but as defined, it is including organizations within that definition. And that's the rationale for why we have put that forward. Let's see, question number two, Commissioner Westberg, I might lean on you to keep firing at me. Why are we addressing the disqualifying criteria and not the entire policy as a whole? So staff's been working on this for about the last month, and what we found, or what we're looking for, is really to get the idea from the commission from this spot. The disqualifying area is maybe the most challenging in the sponsorship aspect, because it's the item that we're leaning on for who can't participate. Assuming most of those that aren't disqualified would qualify, that's the reason we're kind of taking this one small section to start with, so that staff can glean that input early from the commission before getting too deep into writing the rest of the policy. So that was sort of our thought process around why we were bringing forward just this one current section at this meeting. You had another one in there, Commissioner, and I'm blanking on what it might have been.
Well, the other one was reflect on your experience to date without a policy, and what kind of issues you've run into, and that sort of thing, and so that we kind of have some context for what the policy is intended.
One of the challenges we have right now, and I'll say we're in a good spot because we haven't had this issue come up until maybe this past year. We haven't had to decline sponsorships. We did have an issue arise this year with an organization that would not have fit within this criteria based on some permitting issues and challenges. And that was, we didn't have that policy backing to explain that out as to why. And so really this makes it more efficient and more transparent to potential sponsors of what would the city accept. And we don't have to have a negotiation around those elements each time the issue may arise.
But in fact, it rarely arises.
Very true. Thankfully, thus far. Yeah. I would also say, and this is definitely an operational side of the house, we haven't done a great job as a city of going out and soliciting sponsorships, especially pre-pandemic. That just wasn't something we were out there doing, as we're seeing that to be more necessary today and coming out post-pandemic. And I think some of these issues started to arise through Illuminate MI when we were starting to solicit donations and sponsors, and you were getting some really muddy waters there. And we're hoping that we can start to clear that up with some solid policy work.
Okay, well, I'll defer back to Ashley and her original point so we can flesh that out and have more discussion around that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Westberg. Commissioner Cohen.
Thank you, Don Cohen. On the issue of the word person, I kind of agree with both Ashley and Ryan. The use of person is very typical and common in statutes and ordinances and regulations and contracts. But I can also see, and I've had this in my own legal practice, confusion that can result. So there were a couple of different suggestions of how to deal with it. And personally, I don't know that we have to spend a lot of time on that. It can just be changed and use the word sponsor, which I think was one of the suggestions, and that would cover things and make it less ambiguous to somebody kind of reading it cold. So that's the way I feel about it. But it was a word that I understood, but I'm not everybody.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, I can just jump in here. This is Chair Struck. I would agree with Commissioner Cohen and Commissioner Hay and others that eliminating the defined term of person and just putting that into the defined term of sponsor probably eliminates that confusion. Are there other topics in the matrix that people want to discuss? Commissioner Hay.
Thanks. I just had an additional comment about person. The main point of eliminating that definition is because, and I understand the point of using it as a catch-all, but then we don't use that word in the policy. It's only in the definition. So if we used the word person throughout the document and throughout the policy, I think it might make sense so that we're not having to use 8 words to describe sponsor each time. But we don't use the word person in the document. We refer to sponsor, organization, entity, using those singularly throughout the policy. So that's why I would recommend eliminating that and just grouping it into the definition of sponsor, if that makes sense.
And I would just say, I agree. I think it's something we can look at. I want to reserve a bit of flexibility at this point, knowing as Commissioner Westberg pointed out, we're only looking at the one portion right now. There is additional policy language and sections that will be written into this, and but I am hearing. I also have tried to read that as as you're reading it as person, it does read differently if you're not used to that. So and I think to this commission's point oftentimes is to keep things simple, and if we're creating confusion in a way that detracts from the outcome of what we're looking to do. And so I appreciate all of the comments around that and how we can make this cleaner. So I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, another area that I think there was maybe some concern about ambiguity perhaps was kind of the issue of the religious and political aspects, and how would we characterize them. And I think I think it was Katie brought up, like with the summer celebration, I think is a great example of you do have what I'll call title sponsors, and then you have people, organizations that rent booth space, and it could be the same organization, but the way this policy would read is say, well, if you have a political or religious overtone or focus, that you could not be a title sponsor, but you could be a have a booth. And I just kind of wonder, is the city effectively giving recognition in both cases? They're slightly different, I agree with that, but is it, is there a distinction here that needs to be made? And maybe others have some thoughts on that, but I think we just have to be really careful here, because I know that there's been, I think it's true that in the past that these types of organizations have been big supporters of these, and some have been sponsors perhaps of these types of things. All right.
Katie,
not
yeah,
seeing-
I'd be happy to speak to that
Sure.
really quickly and just kind of give our high level view. So from a sponsor standpoint, that relationship really revolves around, for lack of a better term, advertisement of that sponsor. So when a sponsor, if you're listed as a sponsor with us, we're providing promotional opportunities beyond just a booth space. That's logo on the website, that's being included in flyers, that's all of those different things that we're highlighting you as a sponsor. If you're a booth applicant or a nonprofit booth vendor, it's really that. It's very similar to how we treat our food trucks. If we have food trucks come in and want, now there's a different fee, I'll tell you that for sure. We're
Right.
charging the higher fee to those vendors, those who are selling on site. But we created this community booth aspect, separate sponsorships to enhance that community atmosphere, to bring in those community groups to be part of the festival in that manner, by only providing them booth space. Now we do provide a thank you to our community booths, as we do many others and food trucks included, but that's where we're trying to separate the differences between what's a maybe what's a more of a participant or a vendor in a program or activity, as opposed to a sponsor, and what that relationship looks like.
And I was just going to add that Summer Celebration is a unique example that we solicit sponsorships and vendors, but not every event we are including vendors in. So we do have a number of events where the only way to be on site and have, obviously the advertising that goes with it is to be a sponsor. So Summer Celebration does have, both cases, but, mostly music, for example, if you're a sponsor, you have that opportunity to come and have a table and advertise yourself, where we wouldn't just let a vendor be on site to do their advertising.
Thank you. Commissioner Hay?
I have two questions related to this portion of the policy. The first is, what is the intent behind including this? Is the intent to not have any religious or political sponsorship? I mean, it seems that is the intent, and wondering why that is. If a church or political organization came along and wanted to sponsor part of a ballpark and have a banner up, or whatever it may be, what is the intent behind not having that? And my follow-up question would be, have you received any communication from the community that people do not want this? For instance, we had a number of political booths at Summer Celebration. Did we get any feedback from that that helped to inform this policy, or what's the intent behind this?
I'm happy to take that as well. So this is a very common, that the language of disqualifying religious or political organizations is very common across many policies. That is a policy decision. It's not a law requirement. However, I would say from the city standpoint, it is a benefit to us to separate that out, where it doesn't, it can be a bit challenging when we are promoting an organization. So if we're providing promotional access for, be it political or religious organization, that is information that we would be putting out there if we were to not be disqualifying it. A question for the commission is, how do you feel about that? If you feel like we should be evaluating accepting religious sponsorships for our community events, or political sponsorships for our community events, I would need to hear that input. Typically that's not common in other cities. What we have done, as we were talking about those community booths, was providing the opportunity for people to rent space. And we do allow political organizations, churches, and whatnot to reserve those spaces, as would anyone else who meets the criteria required for doing so. So that's the city's position, or staff position, I should say. I'm happy to take input from the commission on that. And for your follow-up question, did you receive any I don't want to put words in your mouth, Commissioner, but negative input, we'll call it, from people who participated? No, Katie, I'd look to you if you received any. Some, anecdotally, maybe yes, that people would have rather seen more art vendors than political booths or something along those lines. But I wouldn't say anything constructive to the content of what was being presented on that street.
Yeah, I would just follow up with, because they're, paying to be a vendor and have a space at the event, their name isn't being put on any marketing material. So it's not the church of whatever sponsoring summer celebration. They're just a booth that people can stop and chat or continue to walk down the street. So we don't get a lot of feedback on, who those vendors should be. We really only, for summer celebration, our application is for Mercer Island nonprofits and community groups. So I think people do appreciate that it's a community focus. But again, those would be the vendors versus sponsors.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cohen.
Yes, thank you, Don Cohen. I can see both sides of this. I'd like to talk about a couple of examples because it helps me understand this a little better. So where would the menorah lighting fit here? I don't know if that's treated as a sponsorship by the, what is it, the Chabad group, I think. If that's treated as a sponsorship, would that be disqualified?
That's actually a third-party event that
Okay.
so it's not really a sponsor. They could go get a sponsor because they're a third-party event. They would be able to get a sponsor.
Yeah, they don't sponsor Illuminate MI. They are providing a third-party event that in partnership we promote as a community event that happens on a city park. They fill out all the special event permit applications. They provide insurance just like you would if you, were going to have any event in Luther Burbank, let's say.
Okay. How about a political one? What if the League of Women Voters wanted to be a sponsor of something, whatever it may be? Is that a political organization under B? Or is that one that you would analyze under C and they might be disqualified or qualified?
Possibly both. To be honest, I don't know their background, so we would have to go through an evaluation process through their application to review that. If they were actively lobbying for something, whatever that might be, then I would classify that as a political organization for that context.
How about Planned Parenthood? Same kind of analysis?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cassidy Berlin.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to jump in and add something that Ryan said to me earlier that could be helpful. Sponsors can be denied on the basis of their organization according to these disqualifying criteria, but they can also be denied on the basis of what they want in that sponsorship agreement. And so if the League of Women Voters were to stipulate something overtly political in their application, that could be an example of a time where there's a clear disqualifying criteria that applies that doesn't have anything to do with them as a broad organization, but as their specific proposed agreement.
Thank you.
Can I follow up one point on that one, Peter?
Sure.
Don Cohen, thank you. That helps. So, for example, the League of Women Voters might not want to be a sponsor to talk about particular candidates, but it might be wanting to promote the idea that it's important to all of us to exercise our right to vote, regardless of for whom we might want to vote. that might be okay, depending on what else is in there. But if they want to put something in their agreement that is objectionable, then that might change that. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And this is Chair Stark, just to kind of follow up on Commissioner Cohen's point, Ryan or Cassie, is the disqualification of religious or political? I mean, it's kind of I mean, is it nuanced somewhat? So depending on the circumstances, you could have one of those organizations if it was, let's say, kind of for religious organization, it was really a kind of a secular activity. They could be a sponsor, if you will, or is it kind of a red line?
On what we put forward is a red line.
Okay.
We're trying to really create a distinction.
Okay.
Where we as staff aren't picking and choosing based on what activity. I would say where this becomes unique, and we did say it, I think this was in the matrix. Sorry if I can't recall. It's religious or political organizations. It's not an individual. So if an individual, say, wanted to sponsor, Ryan Daly wants to sponsor, as long as I'm not sponsoring as Ryan Daly, the candidate, that would be permitted under this policy. Now the side of that would be you couldn't be Ryan Daly and then conduct political activities as part of your sponsorship agreement, because that would be the disqualifying factor in that aspect.
Okay. Commissioner McCarthy.
Thank you, Commissioner McCarthy. I just listening to everything, it sounds like we need to get really clear on like what is a city sponsored event, what is a third party event, and what is an event where there's vendors as well as sponsors, or perhaps sometimes there might not be any sponsors, it might just be vendors. I think that that's all getting a little bit cloudy in what we're talking about here.
So to make the easiest way I can answer that is it's a city event if we are financially responsible for it and coordinating. So if it's a third party event, that's a park permit. We issue those separately. But if it's a city coordinated event, activity, service, that's something that presumably in the recreation division, I have oversight over. That falls under my umbrella. And it would be something that would be upfront that this is a city program, as you see with summer celebration, mostly music in the park, community coffee hour, pickleball, going to the programmatic side.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I just like with our discussions, we're talking and there's pulling like from these three different things. That's what I'm just trying to like put out there, that we need to be clear. Thanks, Ryan.
Commissioner Cohen again.
Yes, Don Cohen. So just so I understand this, a church or a synagogue would be disqualified, no questions asked, under this policy, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so for example, there's a church on Island Crest Way that has sustainability issues as one of its major philosophical tenets. They have their own events regarding that, but they couldn't be a sponsor in conjunction with a city, with Ross Freeman's event, or they couldn't, or with Leap for Green or whatever it is. They couldn't be a sponsor under this.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Okay, that may be too bad in some people's minds. The Jewish Community Center, I know we saw something that it's sort of a hybrid, and I would not want to be the person who had to make the decision. You also have, of course, they have a different issue also, which is the permitting issue, but we haven't gotten to that subject yet. So I'm only a little concerned about excluding some organizations, despite the value of having a bright line, as you said before, and I'm not quite sure where to go with that. Thank you.
Commissioner Hay.
Thanks. I have a couple of comments on this topic. And the first is that B and C are really the same thing based on, I think, Ryan's response in the matrix, where we say if associated with the city. And you said that being a sponsor would mean that would fit the definition of associated with the city. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so B and C are really the same thing. And we may as well combine them because, yeah, that's one comment. And the other, similar to clarifying the third party events versus city events, I think that's an important clarification. And also big events like summer celebration, where you have sponsors and you have booths. I think that having consistency between the sponsors and booths and what we allow is important, because I think many would argue that the visibility that someone gets with a $50 booth is actually far greater than what our sponsors get, which range from 2,000 to 20,000. So having thousands of people walk by your booth is certainly really high visibility and could be thought of as a sponsorship, even though I know in policy terms we're calling it something different. To the community, I think that looks like a sponsor. So if we allow political and religious community booths and we allow that visibility, but we don't allow that visibility for official sponsorships or a banner at a park or our name on a flag at the beginning of an event, that type of thing. Why would we distinguish between the two? Do we want to make it consistent, or do we possibly want to start out without this exclusion and add it in later if we need to? So a couple possibilities there. That's just a comment. I think because we don't have a policy now and we haven't had a problem with regard to this portion that we're talking about, maybe we start without this and edit the policy later. I assume we would review this yearly, so maybe it's something that gets added in at a later date.
If I could follow up on that real quick, if what I'm hearing is correct, you, Commissioner, are more in favor of removing the disqualifier of religious and political organizations?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I think we remove B and C. Well, yeah, I think we remove B and C because they are the same thing. Because if they're a sponsor, they're considered associated with. So either if we're going to include it, combine. But I personally think that we should remove that as a starting point and add it in if necessary, because we have other portions of the policy where we could disqualify based on other reasons. So it might be that a group wants to do something that would be disqualified for a different reason, and we might not really need to worry about this. So my reasoning behind that is to not exclude maybe a daycare that's at a church, or a local church, or the JCC, or some of the groups that we saw at summer celebration if they decided they wanted to be a sponsor. I don't think we want to full stop exclude those groups unless there's a good reason why. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Burstein.
So I think it's very common across all sorts of organizations that have events to separate between a sponsorship and a vendor. So a sponsor shows a willingness to, if you will, pay to play at a certain level of marketing and recognition of a closer link to the event, whoever's running the event. versus somebody who's just paying for booth space and exposure that way. There is, I think, a very big difference in for most people that come across a sponsor in the marketing materials and brand impressions of that sponsor versus somebody who's set up a booth and you're walking by. Even if that booth is set up as listed as a vendor, they're still differentiated from a sponsor. The second thing is, I think it's very important to separate church and state and not to have any appearance of the city aligned or promoting religious and, for that matter, political organization at the sponsorship level. That in no way precludes them from being a vendor. So to Commissioner Cohen's example, with the church having the tenet of sustainability, no, they probably could not be a sponsor of an event like Summer Celebration, but they could absolutely have a booth at the event to promote sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hay again.
I just have a follow-up comment on that point. Where this becomes problematic is the fact that we do allow our sponsors to have a booth. And so we are combining our sponsors and our community booths. We're giving them the same benefit, but for $50, a political and religious organization can currently do the same thing that our sponsors can do, but we won't allow political and religious sponsors. So I think that that's where there's an inconsistency that I think should be clarified. So yeah, and I'm looking at the 10,000 and 20,000 level. Can you answer that question? Do all of our sponsors from Silver to Premier receive the opportunity to have a booth? Oh, not the silver level, does it? I'm looking at this list here. Did all of the sponsorship levels have the opportunity to have a booth?
Yes, for Summer Celebration specifically, all of our sponsors do have the opportunity to be on site. And then of course, they're getting all of those other benefits listed, per the dollar amount, which does mean their logo is going on every flyer, banner, social media post, website, where those, the vendors are not. And the vendors themselves are only nonprofit or community groups. So a business can't come in and say, oh, I want to be a $50, booth. We don't allow that. We don't allow any businesses. So there is that distinction where those sponsors are getting that list of benefits. And then, it's helping really be a part of the event. And, Summer Celebration being the biggest one, we do have a lot of different pieces. A smaller event, we may only have a sponsorship opportunity and no vendors whatsoever.
Okay, so how
I
many?
hope I answered that.
Yeah, it's not clear because we had businesses that had booths like wealth management, real estate, things like that. So I assume
Those
they
were
filled their
sponsors.
application. Okay, so then we had a number, I can think of at least 3 political booths. They weren't sponsors, so they paid $50 to come set up their booth and advertise what they wanted to. So they can do that for $50, but not for 2,000, not for 20,000. So all we're doing is cutting into our fundraising by saying that they can't be a sponsor. We're just saying you can advertise for $50, but not for 2,000 or 20,000. So it doesn't really benefit the city to remove this unless there's something I'm not seeing here.
The only thing I would say to that is, when you are a sponsor, you're entering into a partnership with the city, right? So together with their funds and the city putting on the event, we are going to hopefully expand the event and be able to put it on by getting sponsorships and putting names and logo recognition on everything. And so in turn, I think it could be looked at that the city not only is recognizing those sponsors on our marketing materials, but also saying we're okay with these businesses aligning themselves with the city. Where if, you know, perhaps if you guys agree that we have a church logo and name and a political campaign on all of our marketing materials, it really could look that the city is aligning themselves with that church organization or political candidates. So sponsorships, I really think, is a partnership between that business and the city in order to put on an event. Did you have anything else, Ryan? I don't know if I...
No, it's this is a perspective question or kind of response here is if I'm wearing a City of Mercer Island logoed staff t-shirt, whatever else is on there is affiliated with me now, for better or worse, and that's really the basis of this policy. I do draw a pretty clear distinction between those groups of vendors on the road than I do with a sponsor. It just and that might be more my personal how I view things, but I do see where Commissioner Hay is coming from of the opportunity to open up sponsorships to more organizations, more specifically these religious and political organizations. I do have questions of what that perception looks like in practice, and I feel like there is and why we're recommending not to include religious and political organizations is to kind of to keep us above board, both actually and through public perception.
Vice Chair Bursine.
Yeah, and I was going to just give another example. So if George Washington was running for city council and he elected to be the gold level sponsor, and we accepted that, then his name as a candidate is blasted out in every promotional material for that event. And that, to me, as somebody living on Mercer Island, I would begin to think that the city is endorsing George Washington. And that's not the role of the city in any election. Now, if he wanted to be a vendor and give out pins and buttons at the event, have at it. And that's part of the political process and freedom of speech to be included. And the same issue also extends in Ashley, you brought this up. What about banners at facilities? So imagine at the Island Crest ball fields, there are now banners supporting political organizations or religions. It doesn't seem an appropriate place for them to be aligned with the city as a sponsor. If there was an event at that facility and we were soliciting vendors, they're more than welcome to come in and have whatever we're offering vendors at that event.
Commissioner Cohen.
Two comments. One, on balance, I'm convinced in my own mind now that having that exclusion is a good idea, that having B in is okay. Despite the problems, I think that the way that Paul Burstein commented on it and some other people, I think I agree with that now. I was a little surprised to hear from Katie that a private business can't be, what was it? Can't be a sponsor or can't have a booth?
So we welcome, businesses to be sponsors, and of course now that fit the criteria that all of you may agree upon. But for our vendors at Summer Celebration, we only allow nonprofit or community groups of Mercer Island to be vendors.
So, so all of in the past, before the pandemic, you know, when the physical therapy group here and there, or as Ashley said, the financial consultants, those were all sponsors.
So pre-pandemic, I believe sponsorships and vendors were laid out a little bit differently. I didn't coordinate summer celebration at that time, but I think there was some difference on who could attend and be on the street as a vendor or a sponsor. When we brought summer celebration back, we, you know, really heard that that the community wanted it to be very community focused. So we did make the decision that, you know, vendors could be Mercer Island nonprofits or community groups. And then those businesses that really wanted to be involved, we would offer the sponsorship opportunities.
Did we ever discuss that here? I'm not saying we should have as opposed to staff, but I don't remember that discussion. And I would think that some people, including some members of the city council, would think, hey, take whoever wants to pay us $50, or if it's a sponsor, otherwise.
I don't believe we did discuss it
okay.
among this group or with city council. I would, I guess, personally say that then we are veering kind of towards what Commissioner Hay is speaking of. Then there really isn't a distinction among, hey, I'll just pay a booth fee. It could decline the sponsorship dollars that are coming in for the event versus people just wanting to be on site for one day and paying you know, the smaller fee to be there. We felt that we were giving, you know, those nonprofits a way to be involved without having to be a sponsor. And then of course it enhances the event to have our community groups and nonprofits a part of summer celebration. But then we're still able to ask businesses, you know, to be a sponsor, be on site, get those other benefits that are listed. That was the rationale behind it.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we probably had a sufficient amount of discussion, and I thank everybody. I think there's been a lot of good points made back and forth. But I think to give staff some guidance here, I'd like to do a kind of thumbs up, thumbs down. So if you're in favor of keeping the religious and political organizations disqualifying criteria in the policy as it's currently stated, let's do a thumbs up. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, and I gotta switch to see what I see 4. Okay, so the guidance to staff is to keep it in.
Peter, can I ask a qualifying question of
Sure.
that? There was,
Okay.
I support keeping it in. There was also the, Ashley suggested that B and C said essentially the same thing and proposed combining those two bullets into one.
If I could speak to that really quickly, Chair. This gets to an interesting point. So we're using B as an automatic disqualifier in this situation where if you're a religious or a political organization, you're essentially disqualified from sponsoring. The following is organizations that, if associated with the city, may create the appearance that the city supports a particular religious or political point of view. Now this sentence gets maybe closer to what Commissioner Cohen was talking about with different groups that maybe aren't political in nature. And we could probably think of a few that maybe come out with being political in nature, and maybe they're not a political organization. And so in that instance, we would then use C as the disqualifier to say, no, it's becoming apparent that the appearance here is that the city may support a particular religious or political point of view. So it's not necessarily the same as the political organization. It's a non-political organization or religious organization that thus enters into those waters, so to speak.
It's a subtle point, but I grant it. I appreciate the clarification.
I don't think I answered that very well for Commissioner Hay earlier, so I just wanted to clarify that point.
Okay, I was looking at the 3.0A. Commissioner Cohen had some comments regarding various kinds of businesses and so forth, and in the staff response it says, based on commission input following the meeting, staff will further engage legal staff to ensure appropriate language. Do you need anything more at this point on that item, or are you good to go?
I think if I could, I'm gonna assume here, and that's always dangerous for me, that we're comfortable with the examples listed, but maybe not as comfortable with the policy statement there. That we'd like to see that cleaned up, and I see Commissioner Cohen's hand, and I think he could probably speak to it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Cohen.
At both levels, it wasn't clear to me that law enforcement agency, I think staff was probably thinking of police. And I was thinking not only of that, but if I think of agencies that enforce laws for regulatory compliance, then it got beyond the police kind of realm. That was the overriding concern I had on a specific massage facilities. So a physical therapy place could not do it, or I mean, I know what might be in some people's minds about massage facilities, but you know, the JCC has massage, massage kinds of things. They might be excluded anyway, but so that was my only concern about specific wording, but I don't feel real strongly about it.
Commissioner, you must have been eavesdropping on our staff 3:30 conversation, because that same thought started to enter our minds. The different, there are, lack of a better term, reputable massage facilities, chiropractic facilities that offer therapeutic massage, those kinds of things. And I think that this section could be cleaned up a bit, and staff will work on that with legal to make sure that we get it to the spot we're really looking for. And I think that, being the intent of, less than reputable businesses being permitted to sponsor.
Yeah, I mean, for example, if you deleted massage facilities, you still have sexually oriented businesses in there, which is sort of what you're trying to capture.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the matrix, I think at least the last one I see that perhaps the staff is asking for some guidance is 3.0 J, the last one, which J just says regarding disqualifying criteria, any other reason is determined by the city manager in their sole discretion. And my comment was, I understand kind of having that in there in the sense of, you need to make decisions. You can't always go to a council or commission kind of thing to get input. But I just thought that it's really important that if a disqualification is going to be made that doesn't meet any of the other criteria, that I would think you would want to have that determination be publicly available, or that basically the city manager would outline their reasoning. I think they're from a transparency standpoint. And since I wrote that comment, I looked at criteria F, which is very, very broad, where it just says conditions that are inconsistent with the city's mission, values, policies, and or planning documents. I mean, that's kind of a kitchen sink kind of approach there that I think kind of can take care of anything. So if there's something outside of that, I'm kind of scratching my head and just saying, well, okay, the city manager has their discretion to do that, but I just like to know their reasoning. And that was my suggestion. And I see Commissioner Cohen may have some additional comments. Yeah.
Yes, Don Cohen. I'm not sure that I disagree with what Peter said, although I don't know what make it publicly available. I mean, if you want it in writing so that it would be a public record, right? Is that what
right.
I mean, so maybe the wording's different. I had a little different thought, or an additional thought because we have a city manager right now who, despite some real challenges, is not in her role presenting controversy. She has broad support. That has not always been the case. So I wondered whether it was a good thing for the city to have it as broad as anything that the city manager decides goes. So at very least, I provided this to staff, I thought that J ought to be revised, putting aside Peter's point, any other reason consistent with the city's best interests, comma, as determined by the city manager in their sole discretion. So that kind of generally links back to that stuff earlier and however you define that. Because frankly, I don't want to give anybody a sole discretion that's unrelated. And I'm not sure that it would even be proper for the city council to give that level of discretion without any structural framework. But again, I'm not the city's lawyer.
I will just say this was an addition by the deputy city attorney, and so word for word, I think that Commissioner Cohen, your addition could make sense. I'd want to run it by them, make sure that makes sense to insert. To Chair Strzok's point, and maybe similar to Commissioner Cohen's question, how we publicize a decision like that, I worry everything is a public record because we're going to be responding in writing to any acceptance or decline of a sponsorship. But I worry about the perception of the city putting itself out there saying we're declining this sponsor because of what we learned about whatever, or I don't have the correct example in front of me, but I worry that it's not the city's place to announce that, because the sponsor or the potential sponsor has every right to go out and be upset or share why they were declined if they so inclined to do so. So it's not that I don't feel like we should be transparent with it. I may have to think about what that procedure would look like, and I'd welcome any input that if I'm on the right track here to what Chair Strzok is getting at.
Yeah, I think I'm open to other ideas around that, but I just think that there should be some kind of written explanation, and whether maybe publicized is the wrong term, but as you indicate, it would be a public record. But I just think that the community should have an ability to kind of understand what's going on. I suspect that as I understand it, in your process, you have some discussions with a applicant, kind of informally beforehand. And I suspect if you think there's going to be some issues, you probably at that point may say maybe this isn't the best idea, and it never really gets to more of that formal of a piece. And again, I go back to F and just say that, there's probably the likelihood of this happening, where that, it would be something so brand new that it would happen. But I just think if it does, there should be some memorialization of it.
Peter?
Commissioner Cohen.
Oh, yeah, Don Cohen. If staff and the council wanted to go down this road, with all respect to Peter's suggestion, I think his wording doesn't quite get there, but if you wanted to do something, you would just add in as documented in writing. Okay.
And that's fine.
That's pretty common with decisions like to waive competitive bidding requirements and things like that in statutes, that you have to have a written record if that's the way that staff and the council want to go. In my view, that would be fine, and also include in the best interests, et cetera, et cetera.
That's really helpful. Chair Struck, is that pretty close?
Yeah, I
to the
think
level?
so.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. All right.
My mind went to publicly and
Yeah, no, yeah, that was maybe a poor choice of words, but again, I think it was just I appreciate Commissioner Cohen's input there. Commissioner Cohen, do you have anything else?
No,
Okay, all
sorry,
right.
sorry.
So commissioners, and staff, actually, are there any other topics that need input to help staff as they get going? Vice Chair Burstein.
This is Paul Burstein. There's one other point that I'm troubled with a little bit here. There's an exclusion of bars and taverns. We have, to my knowledge, one tavern on Mercer Island currently. I don't know if there are any other bars. At the same time, we have restaurants that serve alcohol, some of which have a separate bar area. So I would welcome all of them to be sponsors. I understand the concern about having a bar sponsor events, and I'm just curious with the other commissioners thinking about, oldest established business on Mercer Island not being able to sponsor events in Mercer Island because of this clause, but a restaurant, and I take that back. I guess there's a wine tasting company on the island as well, but I really wouldn't have a problem with them sponsoring an event either. I'm curious with the other commissioners how they feel.
Okay. Ryan, do you want to have any input on that to the vice chair's comment?
I was hoping the commission would respond first.
Okay,
in all
all right.
honesty. But I will say, this is something I have thought about as well. And it's I'm really curious what the commission's input on this is. Again, we looked at dozens of policies, and this was included in many. But none of those policies are Mercer Island, and we are a unique community in some aspects. And I don't think we have to have the answer to this question tonight. An appropriate direction is to tell staff to come up with some options that may, depending on what your conversation comes out of after I stop babbling on, will give me some direction of where I should go to look for exceptions, or it could be something that we're evaluating the sponsorships more so on the specific type of event or sponsor agreement criteria, that kind of thing. So I think there's some wiggle room. I'll stop talking. I'd love to hear what the sentiments of the commission are.
Mr. Westberg has some words of wisdom, I believe.
Oh, probably not wisdom, but but I think Commissioner Burstein raises an excellent point. When I read that section through, I noted in pencil the Roanoke, Barrels Wine Bar, both of which are businesses, both of which serve food, and I would think would be, I could see no good reason necessarily to exclude them from a potential sponsorship. I think it also boils down to the definition of those terms and how you apply them to island businesses. But I think you would want to, I don't know whether your discussions at a staff level, got down to specific examples or things like that. But I think it depends on how strict you interpret those terms, and whether you would apply them to any of the businesses that currently exist on the island.
Thank you. Commissioner Cohen.
Don Cohen, yes. Well, there used to be Cellar 46 also, which was a primarily wine, had some food. So it's a historical reality. a current reality. And I agree with Commissioner Burstein and Commissioner Westberg that I think I would probably delete alcoholic. I do agree with whoever responded at the matrix level with excluding weapons primarily. And I can't remember what staff's view was, that you were agreeable with that one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I do think in regards to Mercer Island, as I mentioned, it's a little bit different. We're not, some of these larger cities around that have these bar nightlife type areas. I think it's worth us taking a look at some opportunities for some of these expanded sponsorships. One of the businesses you got that was previously mentioned, the Roanoke, was a sponsor of Summer Celebration pre-pandemic. They were a great sponsor. They're also, it's the Roanoke Tavern. Like but it's also, you walk in, it's a restaurant. And so I'm on board with doing some legwork and trying to find out if there's some alternative language that we might be able to include here. And I'm seeing heads nod, so it appears that people or the commission's supportive of that.
Great. I would concur. My thought was maybe, and this is a tough one, but businesses that are subject to blah 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 in good standing or something. I'm not really sure what the right terminology is, but I think you get a sense of that. Okay. Any other comments or observations on either the questions that were put forth in the matrix, or I'll just open it up to other things that you might have thought about over the last day or two? Commissioner Cohen.
Yeah, thank you, Don Cohen. I think I mentioned this not by name earlier, but when Council Member Jacobson was the liaison, his view, and I don't know whether it was sponsorships or booths or whatever it was, his view that he expressed was, we should basically take in anybody who's willing to pay the freight of, and I don't say that derogatorily, he wanted to try to promote business. And so I don't know whether the council generally has that viewpoint, but unless there's a good reason, I wouldn't be excluding anybody from any of these things. I do appreciate Katie's comment on why the distinction of nonprofit versus for-profit. There are some business reasons from the city's point of view, and there might be might go the other way also. But anyway, that was the only additional comment I had. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Westberg?
Just as a point of clarification, primarily for Ryan's benefit, it's the Roanoke Inn, not the Roanoke Tavern.
That's correct.
And that title speaks to their historical function
Yeah.
as an inn where the ferries landed before the bridge. So I'm not doing publicity for the Roanoke. I just say.
Commissioner Hay.
Thanks. I think in terms of final comments on this, if we do adopt a policy similar to this draft, and we are going to exclude political and religious organizations, I think that we should consider being consistent. I do think we should be consistent. And when it comes to summer celebration, we do not allow political and religious groups to avoid the appearance that we, like we've stated in the policy here, that to avoid the appearance that the city is taking a particular political or religious view. So I would recommend, if we adopt this, we've never had a policy like this before, but if we're going to do this, let's be consistent across our community events to avoid confusion amongst community sponsors, groups, nonprofits, etc.
Okay. We'll hold that one. Okay. Looks like all the hands came down. So on Commissioner Hayes' suggestion that I guess the disqualification be expanded for no political or religious organizations to include that. So Ryan, would that be part of the sponsorship policy then, or is that okay?
No,
He's shaking his head.
That's we don't have a policy around that, and currently aren't contemplating engaging the commission at that level at this time. That's something that we could discuss in the future. There are also free speech considerations that need to be taken into account that I would need to work with the city attorney on. I will also say, from a personal standpoint, or from the direction we are trying to go as a recreation division, our goal is to provide opportunities and engage every aspect of our community in every opportunity possible. And that opportunity in this situation presents itself as vendor booths in many aspects. And so I would say staff would not be supportive of excluding religious or political groups as participants in its events.
Katie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to what Ryan just said, and also just add in, you know, again, Summer Celebration being the biggest event certainly has some more components to it than other events, but you know, the parade is another example of a way that community groups and organizations can participate and get their word out there and really get their name out in the community. And the free speech aspect, we would not be able to you know, disqualify organizations from walking down a public street in a parade as part of that. So just adding that piece on as well.
Okay, Commissioner Cohen.
Don Cohen. I don't have the same confusion problem that Commissioner Hay has alluded to. And I, personally, do I like seeing 41st STEM booth or the Young Republicans or Jews for Jesus? I don't, you know, I don't really care to have those there, but I've never thought that there was any association with the city blessing those kind of organizations. So I wouldn't favor the kind of exclusion that Ashley was talking about.
I am worried if there is that appearance to that comment. If there is an appearance that the city is endorsing those groups in any way, please tell me offline, and I'd like to sort of evaluate our practices around that, because we are separate, and it is a vendor type situation in those with respect to community booths.
Okay, you know, I think for the discussion tonight, I think Director Daly suggested that, you know, that issue of the kind of the vendor permits, if you will, is really not part of this policy per se. And so I think he's received the commentary, and I'm sure that we'll take that up at the appropriate time. So thank you for that. So I'm not seeing any other hands, so I think we will wrap this discussion up. And I think as staff indicated, they're going to go back and take this input and we'll produce another draft that will include section 2.0 as well. So we'll see kind of the full policy, and we'll have another opportunity to kind of review the policy in toto. Is that correct, Ryan?
That's correct. I don't have
Okay.
a specific date yet for
Yeah, I understand.
that will come back. I'm shooting for December. Gosh, we get a lot of holidays coming up here real fast, and I want to make sure that it comes back to the commission in the form that they need to see it in. And I would have liked to provide more info on the policy, or a more significantly complete draft, which I'll commit to providing it at the next one of the next 2 meetings. Let's go with that.
Okay. And just maybe just I'll editorialize for a second. I think this was a great discussion. And again, I will urge all commissioners, if they have the opportunity, to submit questions ahead of time so they can kind of be put in the matrix. I think that really helps the discussion and allows staff to provide feedback and so forth. So with that, we'll close item 3. And the fourth item of business tonight is the 2023 planning schedule update. And again, I call on Recreation Director Ryan Daly.
Hey, it's me again. So I just sort of started talking on the planning schedule. I did connect with, I believe, most of the commissioners for that December 4th special meeting. So we will be moving forward with canceling the December 7th meeting and hosting a meeting on Monday, December 4th. So calendar invites will come out very soon, as well as Zoom links for that. That December meeting, we do have two items, the work plan progress and CIP progress update. So Chief of Operations Jason Kittner will be joining me for that meeting and providing an update on those projects. I anticipate him providing some information on where we came out this year, where we're going next year. We know that we have some master plan work as well as some playground work in the hopper. So he'll be talking a bit about that. And then I'll be providing, and this is kind of timely, an update on where we've come out with our implementation of recreation policies. And so we'll kind of highlight what's working, what maybe could be improved. That'll inform our commission work plan as we go into the year of possibly revisiting a couple of those policies. Spoiler alert, they're working really well, actually. So there might be some minor tweaks that we'll suggest that we've learned over the last year or 2 years, I should say. And then you'll see that first part of the year, we're focusing on the Mercer Island Park Code. Our park code was established for the most part in 1991. So e-bikes, e-scooters, different businesses taking utilizing park space for operations, a whole level of things that need to be updated. So I'm gonna anticipate 3 or 4 meetings of discussion on the park code. That first initial meeting in January will be sort of an introduction, give the commissioners an idea of maybe what to be on the lookout for the next couple of months to help inform some decision making. And then we'll discuss that in a couple of different sections is what I'm presuming, and then providing a recommendation to the city council later on in the year to help inform those updates. Other than that, it's the sort of the regular items and some placeholders for that playground work updates and the master planning process. So 2024 is on us fast. And that calendar will fill up rather quickly, but I'm excited to go into the December meeting and wrap up the year and really some of the great work. It's been a really, really busy one. It's almost felt normal for the first time in a really long time. And so thank you for all of your work on that and taking part in all of these meetings we continue to throw on your schedules. And then just to piggyback on what Chair Struck mentioned earlier, thank you for the conversation on the policy. I actually, I feel really good about the input we were able to take from this to move forward. I know that we've worked on a number of policies, brought them in front of the commission and went back to the drawing board and came back. And I like this cadence and being able to glean some input from the commission on where we should take that policy as we go forward. So thank you for that time you spent tonight on that. That's my rambling, and I'm out. I'm done, Chair Struck. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. The fifth item of business tonight is commissioner reports and work plan updates. Also, if you have anything to report regarding planned absences in the future, you can provide that now. So any updates to provide to us? Commissioner Hay.
So I would like to provide an update on the bike skills area, which I was fortunate to be able to have a tour recently, along with Commissioner Struck was also there, and it looks really cool. And I actually went twice because it was so cool the first day and that I went, and we heard that the people who were building it would be riding the track the next day. And I had to see that. So it was really cool. Some really talented people riding the bike skills area. Really neat to see that level of activity happening there, and I'm excited for it to open.
Thank you. Commissioner McCarthy.
I just wanted to also say how excited I am about the bike skills area. I went with Commissioner Burstein, and I wish that I'd gotten to see people ride, and I can't wait for the opening on the 15th.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. The next regular Parks and Recreation Committee was scheduled for December 7th. However, that meeting has been rescheduled as a special meeting for Monday, December 4th. So please mark your calendars. The time is now 6:35 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned. However, as a reminder to commissioners, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Good evening and stay safe and healthy. Thank you.